Here at the James Joyce Centre in Dublin, we're always pleased to welcome visitors, scholars, this beautiful spring evening really from Brooklyn. This is Darina, who's the Director of the Centre. Very nice to meet you.
Oh,
Yes.
welcome to the James Joyce Centre,
Thank you.
Jim.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful. Well, your audience is waiting for you.
All right.
We're thrilled you could be here this evening, and they're all really excited to hear.
My thoughts on the Prankquean.
Yes, and the beginning of our Finnegans Wake 85 experience here at the James Joyce Centre.
Wow. Is that on board too?
I think so.
Okay.
Great.
Great. Now, be careful in there.
Welcome you all here this evening to the James Joyce Centre. My name is Darina Gallagher, Director of the Centre, and here we are, April 2024, celebrating the 100th anniversary of Work in Progress appearing in print for the very first time. I had hoped to prepare a whole piece about Eugene Jolas, who was Joyce's friend and author of the magazine in where it first appeared. And I wanted to talk about friendship and how important that was to Joyce. But of course, I didn't get any time today. There was a Norwegian choir here, very appropriately for Finnegans Wake. Just to a little bit of housekeeping, that you turn your phones off or on silent. I'm very excited to welcome Jim Keeley here to his talk when I think about the Prankquean. And we've known each other for a few years, but our relationship began on Zoom in the glory days of COVID. And it's wonderful that you're here at last. And even the last time we tried to do this, COVID struck again. We have a few speakers here this evening before Jim will start, but I just wanted to, in true Finnegans Wake style, start at the end. There's far too many men going to speak this evening, so I thought we needed a little bit of Anna Livia Plurabelle. So just for my indulgence, as we begin to think about Finnegans Wake, and particularly Work in Progress, and there's a small exhibition downstairs as you leave in the McGinney room about the publication history. But yeah, let's start at the end. Oh, bitter ending. I'll slip away before they're up. They'll never see nor know nor miss me. And it's old and old. It's sad and old. It's sad and weary. I go back to you, my cold father, my cold, mad father, my cold, mad, fiery father, till the mere sight of the mere size of him, the moils and moils of it, moan and owning, makes me sea silt, salt sick, and I rush, my only, into your arms. I see them rising. Save me from those terrible prongs. 2 more, 1, 2 Mormons more. So, Ave Laval. My leaves have drifted from me. Oh, but one clings still. I'll bear it on me to remind me of so soft, this morning ours. Yes. Carry me along, Taddy, like you done through the toy fair. If I seen him bearing down on me now under widespread wings, like he'd come from archangels, I sink, I die down over his feet, humbly, dumbly, only to wash up. Yes, tide. There's where, first, we pass through grass, hush the bush to wish. A gull, gulls, far calls coming far, end here. Us then, Finn again, take. But softly, remember me, till thousands thee, lisp. The keys to given, away, alone, a last, a loved, along the... Ladies and gentlemen, would you... please welcome Declan Gorman.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of the dreaded men. But there you go. I'll do my best to be inclusive. I actually left my home about an hour and a half ago in North County Dublin under the understanding that the piece that I was going to present to you would be part of the sing-song in the pub afterwards. So forgive me if I lower the tone. I am working, I'm an actor and sometime writer and director. They've come up with a fancy term for me in the new age called a theatre maker, who has had the privilege of working with, among many of you here, Joyce experts and friends who have advised me as a newcomer to Joyce, really in many ways, over the last 8 or 10 years. And I've been working through some of his pieces as an actor, but focusing primarily on the early work of Joyce. The Dubliners' Dilemma was a play that I created based on Dubliners, and I've worked through some of the other works in readings and so on. So I really began to, I suppose, reflect on Finnegans Wake as the next challenge only in recent times, as the auspicious anniversaries of the 100th, the centenary of the publication of Work in Progress, the few pages that appeared in the Transatlantic Review 100 years ago, and of course the 85th anniversary this year came on board. And so I approached Des a couple of months ago, and he and I have been working on some ideas for a reading that I will present in Ottawa and Toronto and the lesser-known Canadian town of Hamilton over the week of Bloomsday. And it draws from the Wake. It draws specifically from that first iteration of the Wake 100 years ago. But it will also present to our friends in Canada, many of whom would not be maybe as immersed in Joyce as some of us here, sort of an introduction to Ulysses, an introduction to Portrait, an introduction to Dubliners. So it's a kind of a reverse chronology. And in order to make them feel comfortable and myself, I wrote a prologue, which I'm going to read to you, and then I'm going to drift into a few lines from the Mamalujo episode. So with apologies to James Joyce, who is a greater writer than I am, and to Patrick Kavanagh, who is on my other shoulder, my other muse, whose poem inspired my opening line here. Kavanagh has a very short poem called No Charlatan Am I, and it goes, No charlatan am I with poet's mouth and idiot's eye. I may not be divine, but what is mine in naked honesty. And I think therein sort of acknowledging his own rough roots and his own kind of sideways journey into the world of literature and academia. No great Joycean am I, nor shall I try to fake deep knowledge of the 4 books of Finnegans Wake. I flunked college, became a poor player that struts and frets, forgets his lines, confuses rhyme with verse. It gets worse, a half-poet who'd rhyme verse with purse if there was money in it. And I know that many of the people here are scholars who revere Joyce, who read Fritz Zen and John McCourt and Danis Rose, of course, and all the biographies and the hagiographies, and even better, the author's letters, Richard Ellman and Herbert Gorman, no relation. My old man was a farmer's son from Donegal. Anyway, you've read them all, and I have nothing new to add, but I hope at least to see the scholars nod their head in sage approval of my pronunciation. Some of you, like me, are here to enjoy a show, a meal afterwards, a beer, maybe learn a thing or two, but mainly laugh, be entertained, reflect. You know a little, I'll lower my voice, about the writer James Joyce. I mean, you know of Bloom and Stephen Dedalus, I assume, but not much more. Well, keep in mind the number 4. Bertolt Brecht was my great hero, my great Shakespeare-o, and he believed in coming clean before a show, not quite explain, but give a prologue setting out the scene. Explaining is a no-no in the arts. But maybe mediate the parts a bit, to help the people sit at ease and not be trembling at the knees, afraid to say I didn't understand a thing he said. So what's about to hit the rafters as I sing, okay, not sing, but speak and share the laughter and the joys of Joyce in my well-trained actor's voice, is a compendium of his works in fours. 4 books, 4 parts, 4 stories, 4 seasons, 4 legs beneath a table. We'll start with Finnegans Wake, which is oblique, with its references to Florian's fables and the 4 masters, Donegal men like my ancestors. Every word a cryptic clue, and there are people in this audience who have spent a life deciphering it. But all you really need to do is listen just, and ride the waves. It's riddled me ree, but not codology. I'll continue thereafter in reverse chronology through Ulysses, the one with Bloom, and Portrait of the Artist, to whom was given the name Daedalus, and then Dubliners, and sure that'll settle us, a nice wee book of stories. So that's our 4. He's written more, poems and prose, but 4 is enough, I suppose. The 4 master waves of Erin, the big 4. That's what we're sharing first. That's what he calls his 4 decrepit souls recalling courting days of old, confusing things that once took place with scenes they saw upon a stage in a scandalous play by Dion Boucicault, and he called this section Mamalujo. Mama who, Joe? Mamalujo. That's where our show begins. Díreach Céad Bliain Ó Shin, exactly 100 years before, in 1924, when, as his smirking brother Stan averred, was heard the last word in literature. Published in a transatlantic compendium, part of a chapter of what would become his great book, Finnegans Wake. And for your sake, I will keep the passage short, and really, this is true, and who'd have thought, this work in progress from 24 is simpler and more legible by far than the version that finally crossed the line, the Mamalujo of 1939, May 1939 to be precise. In Finnegans Wake, Book 2, Part 4, and for my own poor sake, I'll simplify it even more. It's all a dream, a strange nightmare, based on this familiar prayer. Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, bless the bed that I lie on. 4 corners to my bed, 4 angels round my head, 1 to watch and 1 to pray, and 2 to bear my soul away. Part 1 of Welcome, O Joyce. Work in progress, 1924. The actor enters, stooped over like a very old man. The audience hears the sounds of the roaring sea. He cranes outwards to gaze at the horizon. And there they were, too, listening in as hard as they could to the solans and sycamores, and the wild geese and gannets, and the migratories and mistle thrushes, and the auspices, and all the birds of the sea. All 4 of them, all sighing and sobbing and listening. They were the big 4, the 4 master waves of Erin, all listening 4. There was old Matt Gregory, and then besides old Matt, there was old Marcus Lyons, the 4 waves. And oftentimes they used to be saying grace together right enough. And now we are the 4 of us, old Matt Gregory and old Marcus and old Luke Tarby, the 4 of us. And sure, thank God there are no more of us. And sure, now you wouldn't go and forget and leave out the other fellow, and old Johnny MacDougall, the 4 of us and no more of us. And so now pass the fish for Christ's sake, amen. The way they used to be saying their grace before fish, repeating itself for Auld Lang Syne. And so there they were, spraining their ears, listening and listening to the oceans of kissing and their eyes listening, all the four, while he was kiddling and cuddling his Colleen Bawn, the hero. That was very wrong and most improper, and cuddling her and kissing her with his pogue, like Aaron a pogue. The dear, dear annual, they all four remembered who made the world, and how they used to be at that time in the vulgar era, cuddling and kiddling her from under her missel thrush, and kissing and listening in the good old bygone days of Dion Boucicault the elder in Aranapogue, in one of the far back pitch-black centuries when who made the world, when they knew O'Cleary, the man on the door, when they were all four collegians on the nod, white boys and oak boys, peep-a-day boys and peep-and-tom boys with their slates and satchels playing Florian's fables, in the Queen's Ultonian colleges with another fellow. Oh, it brought the dear prehistoric scenes all back again, as fresh as of yore. Matt and Marcus, and after that now, there he was and his Aaron a pogue before the four of them, so shocking and scandalous, and now, thank God, there were no more of them, and he poguing and poguing, and there they were, listening, as tired as they were, the three jolly topers with their mouths watering, along with the other fellow. So pass the pogue, for Christ's sake, amen. Listening and poguing and watering, all four. The old connubial men of the sea, Luke and Johnny MacDougall, and all wishing for anything at all of the bygone times, for a cup of kindness yet, for four far-back tumblerfuls of woman squash. With all four listening and spraining their ears for the millennium, and all their mouths making water. So that's the first 7 or 8 minutes of what will be a 30-minute performance. Thank you very much to Jerry and to everybody here for indulging me and allowing me that opportunity to try out Work in Progress, which will be premiered here in this building, I think on it's either the 6th or the 7th of June. So we'll hopefully see you back for the full 35-minute performance. So thank you again very much.
Thank you so much, Declan. Sorry to spring that on you, but I just thought it would be so wonderful for everyone to hear what you're working on. And thank you. It was wonderful. If I could invite Des Gunning to just introduce Jim Keeley to you all. Des is the inspiration behind this evening. So thank you, Des.
Finnegans Wake and very good.
Yeah, small one.
Oh, yeah, great. Great. Hi, thanks, Rita, and thank you, Declan. Great voice. Love it. So my job is to introduce Jim Keeley, whom I met in Sweeney's on the other side of the river. There was a lovely man who retired from Trinity College as an emeritus professor. He was 82 when he retired, Professor David Sims, and he called into Sweeney's one day and he asked him, did they have a Finnegans Wake reading group? And the wonderful Wendy Conroy, who was there, says, well, we don't have one just yet. And she phoned me and asked me would I run one. So I did run that reading group with David Sims and Mick Farley, who's here, and Celia Fox and a few of us. And we've been going for 14 years. And through that, had the pleasure of meeting Jim, visiting from Brooklyn. And in the way of the Joyceton world, I have visited with Jim in Brooklyn, and he's been back here. So it's great to have him here to talk about this evening what he thinks about when he thinks about the Prankquean. I think, well, you might say this as well. I think we both think about our dear past friend, PJ Dunleavy, who particularly loved this passage from Finnegans Wake. But anyway, so we'll hear more about that. So that's a very rudimentary introduction to Jim, but I think I will also introduce the Prankquean, just in case. So contrary to everything Declan Gorman has just told you, the Prankquean is not in 4 movements, but in 3. Prankquean is different. She's different in all kinds of ways that we'll find out about. but the camera picks her out in very sharp focus when she appears in the middle of chapter 1, and then she disappears into the background a bit for the rest of the book, where lots of other characters dapple along with the same level of exposure all the way through. With the Prankquean is different, and here's how, and she appears. You heard the end of the wake, how the Finnegans Wake ends is Joyce's aquacity, the old men with their mouth watering, Anna flowing out so gently, ebbing into the sea. But when the Prankquean arrives, she is as ferocious as an Atlantic storm. You don't stand in her way. So she arrives like this. It was of a night late, lang time agone, in an owlstein ild, when Adam was delving and his madamine spinning water stills, when Milk Mountain Naughty Man was every bully, and the first leal river robber that ever had her ain way, everybody to his love-saking eyes, and every billy lived a loved with everybody else. And Jarl Van Hooter had his burnt head high up in his lamp house, laying cold hands on himself. And his two little Jiminies, cousin of ourn, Christopher and Hilary, were a kick-a-heeling their dummy on the oilcloth floor of his Homer castle and Earton house. And be Dermot, who came to the keep of his inn, only the niece-in-law of his, the Prankquean. And the Prankquean pulled a rosy one, and made her wit for ninst the door, and she lit up, and Fireland was ablaze. And spoke she to the door in her petty Perusienne, mark the once. Why do I am a look alike a possa porter piece? For the schoolwork sections, but that's all for Jim Keeley to tell you about.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Des, and thank you all for your attendance. And I recognize many faces, and I see many new faces too. Welcome all, and we'll get started. As Des mentioned, this discussion is in loving memory of P.J. Dunleavy, our friend and fellow Joycean who left us too early in his life. P.J. held the fable of the Prankquean to be his favorite part of the wake. Rest in peace, P.J., as you continue to live in our memories. For this brief study of the fable of the Prankquean, I rely in general and for specific supporting points on Edmund Lloyd Epstein's A Guide Through Finnegans Wake, specifically but not exclusively page 14 and pages 33 to 37, while my main argument of the connection between the fable and the first sentence of the novel is original, as far as I know, and my argument completely. So when I think about the Prankquean, I think of the placement, the location of the fable of the Prankquean in the narrative of Finnegans Wake. Why is it where it is? What does it mean to have it there? What does it do there? The fable occurs early in the novel, within the first 25 pages. But because this is Finnegans Wake, to answer these questions, we must start at the novel's end. So we're going to the end of the novel for the third time this evening. The final chapter of the Wake concerns itself with water in various forms: a river's source, the Wicklow Mountains, a flowing river, the River Liffey, a bay, Dublin Bay, and a sea, the Irish Sea beyond Dublin Bay. At the novel's end, she, the river, dies by dissolving into Dublin Bay and the Irish Sea beyond, losing her individual identity in a moment of sublime pathos. As Wake readers, we know that while in the sea, she will undergo the natural water cycle of evaporation into the sky, condensation in the sky, and precipitation back to earth to form the river anew. And as Wake readers, we know also that the novel's first sentence is a continuation of its last sentence, and that the first sentence maintains the focus on water, that of the River Liffey, which leaves its mouth to flow in a circular current around Dublin Bay. It flows in a circular current, that is, until it brings us up smack dab against earth in the form of Howth Castle and environs. Water and earth. Here in the novel's very first sentence, we encounter the first instance in the novel of a polar opposition. Two elements, water and earth, that oppose each other with no unifying resolution between them. All the water's force built up at the end of the novel, The force of the River Liffey, of Dublin Bay, of the Irish Sea, is channeled into that circular current until it collides with Earth. In fact, colliding with Earth interrupts the current's circular flow with all its built-up force, and it is prevented from completing its circle, which has started at Adam and Eve's on the shore of the Liffey. This halt in the current's flow, its failure to complete its circle by reaching Adam and Eve's, holds important implications for the Wake's narrative. Until this point, the Wake's renewal of itself in a sentence that spans its ending and its beginning has succeeded. But at this point, as the unresolved collision of the watery current with Earth prevents its completion of its circle by reaching Adam and Eve's, the Wake's renewing of its narrative is in danger of failing. We recognize this unresolved collision or polarity of opposites as an instance of Giordano Bruno's theory of the identity of opposites, which holds that all entities in the natural and human worlds are composed of elements at first antagonistic to each other, but which eventually amalgamate or join together to form a purposeful unity. Epstein points out that Bruno's theory plays a major part on every level of the Wake, from the initial opposition and then amalgamation of spirit and nature, and of man and woman, to the initial opposition and then amalgamation of Sham and Sean, and of Issy and Essie. On the one hand, we are surprised, or at least I was surprised, to find this instance of Bruno's theory at work in the novel's first sentence. On the other hand, its being there is a dramatic illustration of the theory's central importance as a structuring principle for Finnegans Wake. From this point forward, with the current checked at Hoth, we're forced to shift our perspective from one side of the polarity, water, to the other side, Earth, and the landscape the Earth presents to us in terms of artifacts and creatures. Our attention is seized as if we were reading a book. As if the landscape and the artifacts and creatures found upon it, upon the landscape, upon the Earth, were a text needing to be understood. But what we get is frustration. We're told that nothing has happened yet, but in a manner that informs us of certain things that will happen. We see someone fall from a ladder. We encounter a very big and puzzling word. We come across what appears to be a plowshare. A museum arises dedicated to our history of conflict. The museum has a flinty tour guide who keeps demanding tips. Outside the museum, we see the remnants of a battle, especially pellets and rocks that had been used as weapons. A mysterious woman takes items from dead soldiers, placing them into a handbag. A hen scratches up into the air bits of earth. Two mutually suspicious figures fall into discord, and one of them gets obliterated from the earth by a sudden bolt of lightning. These are just a few examples. Epstein sums up this section of the Wake by comparing its atmosphere with that of 1930s American gangsterism, which Epstein points out fascinated Joyce. All these scenes and events seem random and juxtaposed rather than developing organically one from the other. At this point, it's hard to understand how, or even if, they all hang together, what they collectively mean. I would add to Epstein's insight the feeling that we're stuck. Things are trying to take off, to develop, but they can't because they're clashing together with no forward drive. This stuckness, I maintain, is because of the unresolved polar opposition between water and earth that we found in the first sentence of the novel. It is against this background that the fable of the Prankquean suddenly presents itself. The fable is regarded as one of the most beautifully written and most profound parts of the Wake. as we've just seen as readers of the Wake, we know that the Prankquean comes upon the primordial giant Jarl Van Hoother, living at Hoth in his fortress, with two boys of opposite dispositions, one sad, Christopher, the other happy, Hilary, and a daughter. The Jarl is apparently wasting his life in self-abuse, and the three children are apparently playing pre-sexual bodily games with each other. The Jarl denies the Prankquean hospitality. By habit, and against the laws of hospitality, he closes his door at dinner time, and he refuses to open it for her. He even slams the door shut in her face. In return, the Prankquean kidnaps Christopher and turns him from sad into happy. 40 years later, the Prankquean returns and gives back the boy, is again denied hospitality in the same way as before, and suffers another door slamming in her face. In return again, the Prankquean kidnaps the second boy, Hilary, and turns him from happy into sad. 40 years later, she returns with the second boy. This time the Jarl emerges from his fortress dressed to the nines, or perhaps I should say dressed to the sevens, because whenever Joyce describes someone's dress, he gives 7 items. So he comes from his fortress dressed to the sevens and strikes a deal with the Prankquean. She takes charge of the daughter, the Jarl retains charge of the boys, and the Jarl agrees to quote-unquote get the wind up, an Irish phrase for make a living or make ends meet. Voila, Epstein points out, a first family is formed based upon 3 principles: defined roles, everybody's courteous behavior towards each other, and emphasis on rearing children into adulthood. We must ask ourselves, how does this positive development happen after the preceding landscape of chaos and frustration? The first thing we note in the fable is the identification of the Prankquean with water in the 4 times repeated refrain with variations, she rain, 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 rain falling upon the earth, precipitation. The Jarl's identification with Hoth and environs marks him as earth. So in the repeated raining down of the Prankquean on the Jarl, we get the union of water and earth, thereby the resolution of the polar opposition between water and earth we found in the novel's first sentence. An amalgamation of opposites in the natural world for the purpose of the fertilization of that world. And the amalgamation of opposites in the natural world engenders the amalgamation of opposites in the human world to form a family, a human form of fertilization that corresponds to the fertilization of precipitation on Earth in the natural world. The formerly opposed Prankquean and Jarl join into a parental unity. The incomplete boys' personalities begin to grow into adult completion by learning to accept their opposing traits. The sad or tragic Christopher develops a happy or comedic side, and the happy or comedic Hilary incorporates a sad or tragic side. We assume the daughter will be just fine in the charge of the Prankquean. By showing us how polar oppositions amalgamate to form purposeful unities in both the natural and the human worlds, the fable of the Prankquean illuminates how all those chaotic and fractured scenes and episodes that preceded it will sort themselves out into polar oppositions that will then amalgamate to become purposeful unities in the narrative that follows the fable. Now we understand why the fable is where it is and what it is doing there. It resolves the polar opposition we encountered in the very first sentence, which, as we have seen, thwarted the novel's development until the fable appears and does its work. Now we understand, and does its work. But more, the fable also functions in its place as a gateway. At first, perhaps partaking of the chaos and discord of the previous section in the conflict between the Prankquean and the Jarl, by its end, the fable definitely marks the conclusion of that preceding section of chaos and violence by the Prankquean's successful influence over the Jarl, a conclusion demonstrated by the appearance of a rainbow in one of the 7 garments worn by the Jarl, to quote, his fur-framed panuncular combats like a rud yellow grubline orangeman in his violet indigo nation, 7 colors. This is the rainbow promised on the first page of the novel. Quote, the Regenbrau was to be seen on the aquaface, close quote. And as if the rainbow were not enough, Joyce drives home his point with the second thunder word of the novel. Quote, Perkert has kurum bog raya gako lea gremid grunherth rumathon are didilly fady tilly bemul unukunan. Close quote. This second thunder word stands as a definite bookend to the first thunder word found on the first page and arguably opening the chaotic and fractured narrative section that concludes with the prevailing of the Prankquean over the Jarl. With the end of the fable, we leave behind the study of landscape and museums and fractured narratives, and we are directed towards Humphrey Chimpton Earwicker and his family sailing into Dublin Bay, which will allow the reader to see their dynamic pattern of dual opposition and amalgamation, first presented in the fable of the Prankquean in much closer detail as the pattern plays out in the story of the Earwicker family for the duration of the novel. Moreover, Epstein points out that Joyce adheres strictly to the traditional features of the genre of the fable, a traditional beginning, 3 parts, des, a very clear organization with repetition and variation from part to part, and lots of parallelism, lots and lots of parallelism. This stable structure strikes quite a different note from the chaos and fractured narratives that preceded it. For us, Joyce's strict adherence to the formula of the fable genre that promises that this story of the Earwicker family will be marked by adherence to the laws of narrative development, however unconventional. Unlike the previous fractured and frustrated materials, the Earwicker family narrative will present a coherent, if unconventional, plot, clearly discernible, if again unconventional, character development, and a unifying, if unconventional, theme. Finally, to return to the novel's first sentence, the fable's unifying of the 2 polar opposites of water and earth in the form of precipitation means that the river current colliding against the earth of Hoth will now be able to pass beyond Hoth to reach Adam and Eve's, completing its circle and thereby freeing the narrative current of Finnegans Wake to flow through its courses to its end, or should I say, its new beginning. Thank you. Questions or?
Questions, Jim. Thank you, Jim,
You're
so
welcome.
much.
Okay.
Would anyone like? We've.
So, kind of figures for that, right? So, Adam and Eve seems to be the original story of the original species, or the origins of the codwood story. And you also have here earth and water, 2 primary elements in Green philosophy. And they say that the water, some say, the Mauritian philosophers say that the water is the beginner. And so we have these 2 opposing systems being acted out along the River Liffey, as you were saying. And added to that is the Prankquean coming into Hoth, which is a Gráinne of Wales stories from Galway. And so that whole idea of whether it's water or earth are both giving you the origin story.
Yeah.
And then Hixie coming into the bay, the 4th element of the same story of going to be bang out. So, as a philosopher, you mentioned fables. So for us, he was getting about so there seems to be a shift down it, where he introduced wolves into the narrative. That he's playing on to give us this version of Cousin Jay, the origins of the
Questions.
I've made no pretensions to being a philosopher, and what you said I welcome as a good contribution. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anyone? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim, so much. I think there's a little bit of food and a little bit of wine there, and feel free to look around downstairs at some of the exhibition. And I'm sure Jim is available for very difficult questions out here. We have a few more events coming up, and of course Bloomsday and all the madness and joy that can bring. So thank you for coming, and come again. Lovely to have all the new people here and our international crowd, and of course our friends. Sorry, did you want to? No, you're just waving. Just great. Thank you.